My brother expected a $1,500 gift from me, even if I wasn't invited to his wedding, but before I could react, karma served itself. My name is Samuel, and I am 29 years old. If you ask anyone in my family who the quiet one is, they will point to me. I'm not the sort to shout at dinner or compete for attention. I do not stir the soup. I listen more than I talk. I don't throw tantrums, even though I probably should. That's simply never been my style. But if I've learnt anything, it's that quiet individuals are often misjudged. Sometimes, we are the ones who remember everything. My brother Jacob is 2 years younger than me, and as children, our relationship was typical of two boys of similar ages. Chaotic but close. We shared a room until I left for college, had our fair share of backyard brawls, and looked out for each other when things went wrong with our parents. However, things changed after college. Jacob went into sales and leaned heavily on his appearance, with tailored outfits, a rented BMW, and a social media account full of gym selfies and encouraging slogans he didn't believe in. I kept a low profile, earned my engineering degree, relocated to a quieter city, and developed a stable life that I didn't feel compelled to share. We kept talking, but something was always awry. Like, I was just kept around out of responsibility, not love. When he got engaged to Brianna, a woman I had only met twice, I was overjoyed for him. Even if she seemed like the type of person who said things like, "We're just very curated as a couple," and acted as if my job designing structural components for wind turbines was somehow less impressive than Jacob selling luxury mattresses. I tried. I actually did. I RSVP'd the same day I received the invitation, offered to assist with any tech or venue setup, was politely declined, and even Venmo'd $200 toward the combined bachelor-bachelorette weekend, to which I was not invited. The wedding was held in a vineyard about an hour outside of the city. Rustic, yet pricey, extremely on brand. I had leased a suite, booked a nearby hotel room, and provided a thoughtful gift. A card with a $1,500 check. It was more than just generous. It was significant. That money was not pocket change for me. I had been saving it steadily, hoping to give something meaningful, because I truly believed this was supposed to be a huge time for my brother. I was apprehensive driving up, not because of the event, but because something in my gut told me that this day would not go well. When I arrived at the venue, I noticed the seating map printed on a tiny easel near the door. I scanned it for my name. Nothing happened the first time though. I checked again, and my name wasn't on there. Assuming it was an oversight, I went inside and addressed one of the wedding coordinators, a younger woman with clipboards and a walkie-talkie. "Hi, I'm sorry," I said gently. "I don't think I see my name on the chart, Samuel Reynolds." She looked at me, evidently fatigued, before flipping through her guest list. "Oh, Samuel, you're Jacob's brother, correct?" Her tone altered, as if she realized something awkward. "Yes, there were some last-minute shifts. I think you're supposed to be over by the west wall. There's a few open seats near the photo booth." The west wall. I blinked. That wasn't even at a table. It was near the speakers, where the extra folding chairs had been stacked like an afterthought. Still thinking it had to be a mistake, I made my way over, and that's when I noticed it. The sole designated seat that should have been mine had a place card, but it didn't have my name on it. It stated Tiffany, cousins +1. I had no idea who Tiffany was, but she was already sipping champagne in the seat I assumed was mine, laughing with a bunch of individuals I scarcely recognized. Trying to remain cool, I approached my mother, who was fixing the boutine ear on my father's jacket. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Do you know what's going on with the seating?" She didn't even look up. "Oh yeah. Brianna's family had more people than expected, and since they were all traveling in from such a long distance, we didn't want to move them. Simply hang near the wall during the ceremony. You'll still see everything." The wall. I echoed a little too loudly. My dad gave me a look like I was making a scene. "It's not a big issue," my mom replied, waving me off with a wave. "Just don't ruin the pictures by pouting." I wasn't sulking. I was stunned. And then came the ultimate surprise. Brianna's voice behind me was clear and sharp. "Oh, good. We're just trying to keep the family photos looking clean," she replied, not even waiting for a response. I'm not sure what my face looked like, but it must have told everything I was trying not to say because she swiftly answered, "It's nothing personal." I swear you'll be in the reception photographs. I nodded tightly. She walked away with her bridal posy in tow. There is a type of humiliation that does not include yelling or tears. Just a deep, hollow ache in your chest as you realize you are not welcome where you should be. I remained there for a minute, trying to swallow it all in, before my gaze shifted to the gift table across the room. A white linen-covered surface near the cake, filled with pastel-wrapped boxes and beautiful envelopes. Mine was simple to spot: matte silver, handrest, and neatly tucked under a tiny ribbon. I had carefully wrapped that envelope, including a note about how pleased I was of Jacob, and how I hoped the money would help him begin his next chapter. I did not even think. I strolled right over, reached down, and calmly took it back. Nobody stopped me. No one noticed at first until I went toward the door and someone, possibly one of the groomsmen, cried out, "Hey Samuel, where are you going?" I didn't stop. I simply looked over my shoulder, held up the package and said, "Do not worry. I'll stay out of the picture indefinitely." I was almost to the exit when I heard Jacob's voice behind me. "Samuel, please wait." I stopped walking but did not turn around. I stood directly by the enormous double doors that led out to the gravel parking area. One hand on the polished brass handle, the other holding the envelope as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. Samuel Jacob spoke again, this time closer, his sneakers crunching softly on the floor behind me. "Come on, guy, do not do this. It's not very profound." I cautiously turned around and, for the first time in years, looked him in the eyes. He stood there in his fancy tux, head slightly bowed, champagne still fizzing in a glass in his left hand. He appeared perplexed, as if I were the one making a fuss, as if he hadn't just relegated his own brother to a folding chair near the photo booth, because Brianna's cousin had brought an extra guest. "Not that deep," I said gently. "Yeah," he responded, shrugging and lowering his voice as if he didn't want the other guests to hear. "It's just the seats, man. It isn't like we kicked you out. And Brianna's family. Man, they flew in from Portugal. We needed to make room." I let out a quick laugh, but it was not humorous. "So I get to sit in a corner and hope no one questions if I am the DJ. Dude, don't be too emotional. It's just one day. Are you really going to make this about yourself?" That was a hit. Make it about myself. I'd spent years attending birthdays, holidays, and family cookouts. Always the one to give cards, remember anniversaries, stay late and assist cleanup while Jacob went to take a call. I never created anything about myself. And perhaps that was the problem. Maybe they were so used to my not taking up space that the thought of me needing a chair, a single physical chair, became too much. "I flew out," I replied softly. "I rented a hotel. I bought a suit. I gave you $1,500. "We're giving," he amended, pointing to the envelope. "Right." I said it was. But then I realized something. I'm not truly your brother today. I'm merely in the background. His jaw clenched. "You are exaggerating this situation." "No, I said you already had. You just assumed I wouldn't notice." He moaned and rubbed his temples. "Look, it was Brianna's call." "Okay." She wanted the images to capture her entire closed circle. Clean lines, colors that complement and so on. So I did not match. I said, "Did she run a background check on who had photogenic bone structure?" He didn't respond. Perhaps he knew better than to attempt. "You know," I murmured, finally walking back to him. I wasn't expecting a spotlight. I did not expect a toast, a dance, or a shout-out. I just wanted a seat, somewhere that said, "You matter enough to be here like everyone else." "You do matter," he mumbled, almost as if it was painful to say. "Then why didn't you act like it?" His gaze shifted to the rest of the room. The visitors were now watching more openly. The photographer was halting in the middle of a shoot, and the DJ was slightly lowering the level. He despised this type of attention. I could see it across his face. He expected the day to be ideal, curated, and Instagrammable, but it wasn't. Not because I had a tantrum, but because I refused to go quietly. "Look," he said with gritted teeth. "If this is about money, it isn't." I cut in. "It's about respect. Today taught me how little I have from you." He opened his mouth to complain but nothing came out. just one frustrated exhalation. "I'm leaving," I explained, adjusting the package in my palm. "Don't worry. I'll make sure the images are great. There's no awkward older brother in the backdrop to throw off the symmetry." I went away before he could answer. The dirt crunched under my shoes as I walked to my car. I did not cry. I did not toss anything. I sat behind the wheel for a time, watching the vineyard disappear into the horizon in the rearview mirror. It seemed odd, as if I had just stepped out of a film in which I was not cast as a key character, not even a supporting one, but rather as an extra who ventured too close to the camera. Back at the hotel, I changed out of my suit, packed my suitcase, and examined the envelope I had retrieved. I took out the note I'd written, about being proud of him, and hoping the money would help them start a new chapter. I read it once, and then tore it in half. Then I shut off the phone. It did not stay off for long. When I turned it back on about an hour later, there were 6 missed calls from Jacob to my mother, as well as a succession of increasingly concerned texts. Brianna sent the last one. All it said was, "You really ruined everything today." That's when the guilt disappeared. That line, the way she said it, as if I had ruined their carefully curated little fantasy, made something in me click into place. I had not ruined anything, I'd revealed it. But it was not the end. Definitely not. The following morning I checked out of the motel before sunrise. When I dropped off my keycard, the front desk worker hardly looked up, which was great with me because I didn't want to make small talk. I grabbed a stale croissant from the breakfast bar, flung it into my passenger seat, and drove out of the Grapetown, as if it owed me money. By the time I returned to my apartment, I had 11 more missed calls and 2 voicemails that I didn't want to hear. My mother's text had completely changed tone from, "You shouldn't have walked out to please call your brother, he's devastated," to one that made me giggle. "Samuel, family requires you to make sacrifices from time to time." Sacrifices. I sat down on my couch, still wearing my trousers from the night before, and reread that statement. It sounded like it came from a refrigerator magnet in a petrol station gift shop. What had Jacob sacrificed? His wedding photos would still be on brand. His spouse was still planning to share them with captions like, "Blessed and our fairy tale begins." He'd still get the tailored experience he desired, minus one sibling who allegedly clashed with the color scheme. And here's the thing. I had already made the sacrifices. They simply never noticed. For the past year and a half I'd been quietly assisting Jacob with his startup, a mattress import firm that was, honestly, losing money. It wasn't well known, but when he initially started it, he contacted me in a hurry because he needed someone to co-sign a loan, not for a house or a car but for warehouse space and an inventory contract. I did not ask for anything in return. I figured he was my brother. If he succeeds, everyone wins. If he fails, he has at least tried. And, yes, a part of me hoped that supporting him now would be perceived as more than Samuel's dependability. I never informed our parents about it. I didn't even tell my friends. It was just something I quietly accomplished. I made sure the payments were completed on time, took a few calls from the bank when things became tight, and even transferred an emergency $3,000 last fall when his supplier almost pulled out. All without a thank you note longer than a single line. "I appreciate it, bro." That check I had retrieved from the gift table wasn't just a wedding gift. I eventually drew the line. But today, sitting in my apartment, surrounded by unopened mail and half-wilted plants, I recognized something deeper. They did not simply forget my place at the wedding. They'd completely forgotten my position. So I started to work. First, I opened my files, including every email thread, signed document, and bank statement related to the loan. I was still the co-signer. Thus I still had administrative access. The loan was not completely paid off, not even close. And while I hadn't made any formal claims against the company, I did have leverage. I did not want to destroy him. I actually didn't. But something about Brianna's reply, "You really ruined everything today," rang in my ears like a challenge. As if their immaculate little world couldn't take 1 ounce of reality. As if my quiet support over the last 18 months was less essential than how I appear in the background of their Instagram carousel. I wrote an email that was short, concise, and legally sound. It told the bank that, for personal and financial reasons, I was formally withdrawing as a co-signer, and no longer authorized the use of my credit or identity in company operations. I attached the appropriate forms, copied Jacob's email address, and pressed submit. Then, just for good measure, I sent a few critical documents to a lawyer friend of mine from college in case things got sticky. I wasn't expecting a fight, but Jacob was impulsive, and Brianna, well, let's just say I didn't trust someone who referred to wedding centerpieces as branding assets. About an hour later, my phone vibrated. A number I did not recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again. This time it was Jacob and I responded. His voice had been clipped. Tense. Did you recently get out of the loan? Yes. Why? Now you're getting married, I stated plainly. It's time to stand on your own. There was a pause. Samuel, come on. Now is not the time to be petty. I could hear it. He was trying to keep his frustration under control. The tone of someone who still thought he was the sensible one in the conversation. That I was simply overreacting. Thinking it would all pass like one of his many past due invoices. This isn't petty, I explained. It's overdue. You're seriously doing this because of a chair? No, I responded, reclining back. Because of a pattern. And a chair was the last straw. He breathed sharply. Okay, let's chat. Come over. We'll figure something out. You mean like how you figured out where to seat me, how to tell everyone I didn't matter enough for the photos, or how to let your new wife treat me like an inconvenience? Silence. You didn't even ask if I was okay when I left. I added, you didn't check on me. You called because you now want something from me. Silence. So is this permanent? You're just done. I don't know yet, I said honestly. That depends on you. And then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant or smug. I felt tired, as if I had just finished cleaning up a mess that wasn't mine but had been left for me all the same. A mess that had been accumulating for years. Brianna's father, a quiet investor in Jacob's business, had questions, and my mother was now organizing a family mediation dinner, and my inbox was about to fill up with messages from cousins who, it turned out, had also been snubbed by Brianna's guess. But I'll get to that soon, because the moment that truly shifted everything, the one when things went from awkward family drama to full-blown fracture, came 3 days later. I received a Facebook message from my cousin Melissa. We weren't particularly close, but we'd grown up around the same chaotic holiday dinners and shared more than a few eye rolls over the years. Brianna had apparently sent an updated guest flow to the wedding coordinator 2 nights before the event, reshuffling seating to optimize the aesthetic. Melissa had been seated at the farthest table near the portable heaters, and her husband had not even received a place card. Melissa had already spoken with 2 other cousins, one who had driven 6 hours and was not even offered a drink, and another who had brought a $400 espresso machine from their registry, only to be seated behind a hedge. Melissa ended the call with, I don't think I'm being dramatic, but this really feels like they used us as fillers. Later that night, I got curious and went to Brianna's Instagram. Sure enough, the photos had started rolling in perfectly filtered snapshots of rustic charm and candid laughs, and Jacob looked like a cologne ad. I told her she wasn't being dramatic at all. Brianna looked like a bridal influencer on a sponsored post, and the captions were as hollow as I expected on the day our forever began. I scrolled and scrolled, and not a single photo featured a member of our family, not even our parents, not even Jacob's best man, who I later discovered was one of his old co-workers and not his actual best friend because he didn't fit the look. It dawned on me that this wasn't just about me being disrespected. It was about the entire family being repackaged to fit a brand, and they assumed none of us would say anything. The next morning, I called my parents. Mom answered on speaker, implying that Dad was hovering nearby, and I kept it civil. I asked how they were doing, if they had returned, okay, and how the rest of the reception went. They were guarded, courteous, but careful, and I could sense they didn't know where I stood. Mom finally sighed and said, Samuel, I wish you hadn't left like that. You have embarrassed your brother. I waited for the beat. Did he tell you where I sat? There was a pause. I believe there was a mix-up. You should have spoken quietly so that it would appear better on camera. I asked, not hiding the bite. She didn't respond. I'm not angry, I said calmly. I'm just done pretending I wasn't treated like an afterthought, And apparently I wasn't the only one. That piqued their interest, so I told them about Melissa, the cousins, and the people who were quietly simmering behind the scenes. All of them were too polite to cause a scene, but not too blind to see what had happened. Dad finally spoke, saying Brianna organized the majority of it. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. And Jacob's letter? That's what no one's saying. Mom tried to defend him, saying weddings are stressful, couples make mistakes, and maybe they'd make it up to me later. They won't, I said flatly, because they don't believe they did anything wrong. When I told them about the loan, the silence on the other end was immediate and total. I gave it a second to sink in. You what? Dad finally asked. I co-signed the loan for Jacob's warehouse lease 18 months ago, and I've been covering the payments he couldn't make. No one knew because I didn't make it a thing. I just did it quietly like I always do. Mom's voice cracked. Why didn't you say anything? Because I thought I was helping, I said. Because that's what my family did. I let the silence hang again. Anyway, I continued. I pulled out. I notified the bank. Mate is now on his own. Dad cleared his throat and said, You're trying to sabotage him. No, I said. I just stopped protecting him. Later that day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Brianna's father, Mr. Galen. His tone was icy but polite, and he asked if I could clarify some recent changes in loan agreements that had come to his attention. I explained the situation, my previous involvement, my formal withdrawal, and the fact that I was under no legal obligation to continue supporting a business that had excluded me financially and personally from the start. I understand, he said after a long pause. I just wish you'd spoken to me first. The next 48 hours were a blur. The fallout spread fast. Jacob called 3 more times and left voicemails, none of which I answered. One was furious, the next was apologetic, and the third was a jumble of half-excuses and forced chuckles. He said Brianna was upset, and everyone was being dramatic, and couldn't we just hit reset? But I didn't want to reset. I wanted closure. That Friday, I received an invitation to a brunch organized by Melissa, where a group of cousins and second cousins were planning a low-key get-together to decompress and quietly acknowledge that something had broken between us and Jacob. There were no staged photos, no filters, no hierarchy of who looked good on camera, just coffee, waffles, and people who wanted to see each other. We were engrossed in stories, laughed at the absurdity, and even cried a little, especially the cousin who had paid for her flight on a credit card to support family. And near the end, Melissa looked at me and said, Thank you for walking out. We were all thinking about it. You just had the guts to do it. That stuck with me. It would have been easier to stay quiet, to sit in my little folding chair near the wall and smile politely for the camera. But instead, I stood up. Not for drama, not for revenge, but because I finally knew my worth, and I wasn't going to let them cut me out of it. 3 weeks later, Jacob sent a handwritten letter, which I still have tucked in the drawer, with the ripped-up note I once included with that $1,500 check. The letter was a mix of regret, frustration, and vague attempts at reconciliation, and he never actually said the words, I'm sorry. I used to believe that keeping the peace meant avoiding conflict, but now I realize that it really meant ignoring you. I haven't responded, and I may or may not do so in the future, but I know this. I'm no longer the background brother, no longer a placeholder, no longer a fallback, no longer a chair by the wall. My name is Samuel and I finally chose myself, and this time I stayed in the frame. Thanks for watching and sticking around till the end. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next drama-filled episode.